Hey everyone, happy Tuesday and welcome into another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you're all doing well today. Big show coming your way today. Shamus Fillmore on a Tuesday, as he always is. He'll be here with me this afternoon. We'll talk about a number of different things. A lot of big NHL news today, just on the cusp of the start of training camp for the 2022-2023 season. So we will get into that today. We're going to talk about the biggest storylines or the most intriguing storylines as we head into camp regarding certain teams. It can be a player, it can be teams, it can be certain situations, contract holdouts. So we're going to get into those storylines today. We're going to touch on the football games last night. We're going to talk a little baseball as well, as that season is slowly winding down. It has been on the back burner with the NFL, which is the juggernaut. It swallows up everything. The Blue Jays have been playing well. The Mariners got a win yesterday. The Houston Astros clinched the playoff spot, clinched the division last night for the fifth time in the last 6 years. So that's all happening. It's not top of mind. It isn't the biggest story. It isn't the most interesting story, quite frankly. But we're going to get into all of it today. But before Shamus joins us in about half hour's time, let's start with what we always do: football. Last night was a rare Monday night doubleheader. I hated the way they set it up, but I'll get to that in a minute. But it was a night where we saw two teams make a statement. Two teams lay down the law. Two teams that dominated really from start to finish. The Buffalo Bills and Philadelphia Eagles, after 2 weeks, and 2 weeks, it's not a large amount of time, but that's all we got to go off so far. After 2 weeks, the Buffalo Bills and Philadelphia Eagles can legitimately say that they are the best team in their respective conference, that they have the throne. They are the best team. Teams have to come up to their level. No, I think people expected that with the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs. Buffalo Bills are Super Bowl favorites, betting favorites at the start of the year on FanDuel Sportsbook. The Philadelphia Eagles started to get money pouring in late, but they were surrounded by talent, but there was still the wonder, can Jalen Hurts figure this out? Nick Sirianni's kind of a weird head coach. We don't know much about him. Can he do this? Well, the Bills dominated last night. Wasn't the most impressive win to me because the Titans aren't a good team. The Titans are not going to make the playoffs. So the Bills are impressive. I'll get to them, but that's not where I'm starting today. I bet last night on the Vikings. I took the Vikings to cover the 2.5 points against the Eagles. I thought the Vikings would win the game last night, quite frankly. I bought into week one too much. I took the Vikings and ESPN Survivor pool that I'm doing online. And I thought they'd be a great team, which I still think they can contend for a playoff team. But I bought into week one. And I forgot my own rule when I'm thinking about games, when you're thinking about gambling. Sometimes you just have to look at the quarterback and think, who do I like more? And to me, Minnesota or Philadelphia, it's easy. Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. I will take Jalen Hurts every day of the week over Kirk D. Cousins. And yet I still bet on the Vikings. So last night I'm shooting myself saying, Noah, what are you doing? And I'm glad that game happened last night. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I got to see all of it because it gave me a reminder. And I think it gave a lot of people a reminder just how good Jalen Hurts is. I talked about this a lot last year. Jalen Hurts has been doubted his whole career. First, he can't throw. He's not athletic enough. Well, he got replaced by Tua Tagovailoa. Oh, he's replacing Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. No. Jalen Hurts is one of the most unique and one of the most deceptive quarterbacks in the NFL. Kyler Murray has more speed than Jalen Hurts. No doubt about it. Patrick Mahomes is a better thrower. Josh Allen is more physical. Go through all the attributes. But when I think of deception, when I think of a quarterback, when you think of a run-pass option, right? You have the quarterback in the shotgun. You have a running back behind him. It can be Miles Sanders. It can be Jordan Howard. It can be Boston Scott. Name a running back on the Philadelphia Eagles. Every time Jalen Hurts has the ball and he puts it into the belly of his running back, it looks like it's going to the running back, doesn't it? He has a deception. The way he runs when he's in out of the pocket and he's running the football, he has a deception about him that you can't hit him. He doesn't take big hits. He'll slide. He'll avoid it. He'll get out of bounds. He is deceptive as hell. Not to mention, I think he's really, really smart. Also, he's got a better arm than we think. He hit Quez Watkins right down the rail, touchdown pass last night. He can throw the ball downfield. He can hit the intermediate routes to Devontae Smith. Jalen Hurts can do anything you want with a quarterback. Not to mention, I talked about this yesterday, and I give credit to teams that you don't look at a player and say, okay, these are his limitations. And, okay, well, we need to pick a different player because he doesn't fit into our system. Oh, he doesn't fit into our system. We need a pocket passer. We need this because our team is built this way. Well, screw that. Draft the best player, and if you think Jalen Hurts is the best player that you can get at that particular spot, build around his skill set. I mentioned this with Tua in Miami, Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. The teams that figure this out early will have success earlier. You have a statue at quarterback, get a great offensive line. It's more important to have a great offensive line with a statue, but for Jalen Hurts, what is this team built on, the Philadelphia Eagles? Toughness. It's built on pushing people around. The city of Philadelphia, the Flyers haven't been tough in forever, but this Philly team is. That offensive line is the best in the NFL. I said that before the year started. I have not changed my mind on that. You look at the way they're creating holes last night for the run game. You look at the way they're creating holes for Jalen Hurts when he's moving the ball, when he has tons of time in the pocket to find a receiver down the field. Jason Kelce, Brandon Brooks, the veterans, Landon Dickerson, these guys are the best at their position, and that is the entire O-line for the Philadelphia Eagles. That is the identity of their team. It creates everything that works for them. You want to create a hole down the field for Devontae Smith? Give your quarterback an extra second. Boom. Touchdown. Quez Watkins down the rail. We need Jalen Hurts. We need to give him at least 3 seconds before a passer can get to his face. He's got 4. No problem. Boom. Down the rail. Quez Watkins. Touchdown. That is how they play. Get extra time for your players. Get open holes for the running backs because Miles Sanders had a good game last night. But it's also what I love about their offensive line. They use it in the pass game because they use their short passing game. Dallas Goedert had the most receiving yards on the Philadelphia Eagles last night. He's on a team with Devontae Smith, who's a Heisman winner, and A.J. Brown, who's an All-Pro. You look at their short intermediate passing game where he just throws the ball. It's about 2 yards past the line of scrimmage. Offensive linemen are blowing people up down the field because guess what? He's got 20 yards. Then he's tackled. Big first down. Keep going. High tempo. Reset the play. The Eagles are proving that they deserve the respect they were getting preseason. And I look at their first 2 wins. Okay, you can say they beat Detroit. I think Detroit's a pretty good team. I think Detroit's going to win 7 games at least this year. Detroit's a sneaky good team. They crushed the Commanders in week 2. I like the roster in Detroit. And then they beat Minnesota. I like Minnesota. I think Minnesota will be a playoff team. Justin Jefferson is one of the best receivers in the NFL. To me, he's the best. Stefon Diggs may want to have a word. But, Justin Jefferson can run any route. And credit to Darius Big Play Slay last night. Because Philly's defense can play when they want to. Darius Slay is a great cover corner. He's physical. He gets in your face. I like the way Darius Slay plays football. I thought he had a winning game last night. He made some big plays on Irv Smith on third downs early in the second half. He made a good play on Justin Jefferson on the first drive of the game. He can lock people up. He's a physical. He's a guy that plays with emotion. He comes from the Detroit Lions. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he wants to prove to people that he can be one of the best at his position. And he is. What else about this team? Defense, offensive line. They got weapons. Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, Quez Watkins. But my biggest thing is the deception of Jalen Hurts and the fact that he is better than we think. He already looks better than he was last year. He had 2 rushing touchdowns last night. He threw a touchdown. He has all the tools in his toolbox to succeed. Not to mention, I think he fits into the Philly culture. Philly's tough. They want to win. It was their home opener last night. It was loud at Lincoln Financial. I credit the Philadelphia Eagles for trading for A.J. Brown. They saw a need in the receiver room. They got him. They signed him. Jason Kelce came back. They told him to come back and play center for them because he is the best in the NFL. They drafted good offensive linemen. They drafted well defensively. They got Jordan Davis. They have Nakobe Dean, who was a steal in the second round of the draft, who fell. They made good selections. They have good players, skilled players. And to me, they have a really, really good quarterback. The NFC isn't full of great quarterbacks. In his division, he's got Daniel Jones. He's much better than Daniel Jones. There's Dak Prescott. I think Jalen Hurts is closer to Dak Prescott than most people. He's certainly better than Cooper Rush. And you have Carson Wentz. He's better than Carson Wentz. He replaced Carson Wentz, and he's also better than him. They're back in the same division, which is funny. They play next week. Eagles go into Washington on a short week. But that's who he has to compete with. The strange thing is the Giants, the surprise Giants, are 2-0 with the Eagles. Normally it's been the Eagles and Cowboys division going back and forth for a number of years now. The Giants are back in the fray, and Commanders and the Cowboys are both at 1-1. In most cases, skill will prevail. The Philadelphia Eagles are more skilled than the Dallas Cowboys. Defensively, the Cowboys are elite. If Trayvon Diggs can keep playing the way he is, Micah Parsons may be the best player in the NFL, right there with Aaron Donald. If they have a defensive player of the year type effort from him, if their defense holds up, Doris Armstrong continues to grow, the Cowboys defense will keep them in games until Dak comes back. But that offensive line in Philadelphia is much different than it is in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. It's much different than it is in Tampa Bay where they played Tom Brady. I mean, I could talk, that was another thing that came to mind, is Tom Brady's regression, but I don't want to talk about that right now. I still look at it and think, Eagles have better wide receivers, they got a better offensive line, and Jalen Hurts can make the plays. So I still would favor the Eagles in this division. The Giants, they have a good team, but I think they can battle, maybe get 8 wins this year. That would look as a positive season for the New York Giants with newly head coach Brian Daboll, and I still think they want to move on from Daniel Jones in the offseason. Looking at the rest of the NFC, the Packers are always there. I think the Packers are going to have a good record this season. I think the Packers are a good team. Their defense is right there with the best in the NFL. Their pass rush is solid. Their secondary is where they really excel. Not to mention Quay Walker looks good at linebacker alongside Rashawn Gary. I'll never count out the Packers because I think Aaron can figure it out. He'll work with what he's got. I talked about the way they're pivoting their offense yesterday. I think Green Bay will be a playoff team. I think they'll win the NFC North. Detroit, I think, will battle. I don't see them in that mix as one of the best teams in the NFC. You have the Bucs in the South. Bucs defense looks rejuvenated. It's the best part of their team right now. Tom Brady's getting worse. We talked about, will Tom Brady ever fall off the cliff? I'm not going to make that take. I'm not going to be that guy. However, through the first 2 games of the year, Tom Brady's played like crap. Let's just be honest. He was garbage on Sunday and he was garbage in week 1. The only thing he did well yesterday was bitch and complain about his poor play. And bitch at the officials for not bailing him out, which they did on the drive that ultimately won them the game. He hasn't played well the first 2 weeks. Maybe he'll figure it out. It is Tom Brady, but if I could see anything, I don't see his passes. He's not as crisp. He doesn't look set in the pocket. You look around the NFC West, who the hell knows? Arizona, I have no faith in Arizona. They won a crazy game against the Raiders, but that tells me more about the Raiders, how they never were. You have the 49ers, who are still, they're pivoting. Jimmy Garoppolo is now back at quarterback. I think that gives them a better chance of winning this season. And their roster's loaded, but we'll see. The Rams are incredibly inconsistent to start the year. I don't trust them whatsoever. So right now, I think the 2 best teams in the NFC are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Philadelphia Eagles. But the Bucs have looked worse than the Eagles in the first 2 weeks. The Eagles have scored over 30 points in both games. The Bucs got to 20 points. That's the highest they scored this year in 2 games offensively. Not to mention they had a pick 6, so technically they haven't scored 20 points on offense, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this year. I'm giving respect to them because they have Tom Brady and they have that defense. But if it was just based on their offense, the Philadelphia Eagles are just complete team effort through 2 weeks, the best team in the NFC. They are. Because the other teams in this division have been pretty porous. Rams crushed by the Bills, and then they should have lost to Atlanta. San Francisco loses to the Bears in week 1, and then they beat the Seahawks. They haven't played a team yet. They haven't played a good team yet. Arizona, as I mentioned, I don't trust Cliff Kingsbury. I'm not going to bank on him to do anything competent this year. So I'm not putting any faith in Arizona until I see it. They got the Rams this week. See what they can do. South, the Saints, completely overrated. I never saw it. I didn't have them making the playoffs before the season started. Their offense is terrible. Jameis Winston making stupid decision after stupid decision. I mean, I love a 3rd and 9 deep shot more than anybody, but I hate it when you're on your own 9-yard line and then you have to punt and you muff it. That makes a whole lot of sense. That's something a Denver Broncos coach would do. Nathaniel Hackett. God. Let's bring in, I see he's on the screen. He's wearing a weird jersey. He's repping a Boston Bruins jersey, and yet he hates the Boston Bruins because they live rent-free in his team's head. Let's bring in Shamus Fillmore and repping as an
Folks.
jersey. I'm assuming this is a sign of respect because of the retirement today.
No, I'm actually changing over. I'm a Boston fan for this upcoming season. Just announcing it first time here on the pod.
Okay.
No, no, you're right on the money. I'm paying my tribute to one of the best captains I think I've seen in my lifetime. A guy that will probably forever be known as one of the fiercest / probably toughest competitors that anyone will face in the NHL. You just ask Pacioretty and that board shot he got a number of years ago. So no, I had to pay my tribute. He's a hell of a captain, and I think you were the one who actually made me buy this, or nudging me to buy it anyways. So yeah. I must have been boozed up because the last time I was wearing it, I must have been drinking because it smells awful. So yeah, I don't put it on too often, but there won't be any Montreal jerseys coming up on this stream anytime soon. So just to let everyone know that.
What if they played the playoffs?
Oh God!
We wagered.
I would do it then, but I'm not buying one. I'm never ever going to buy a Montreal Canadian. Yeah, I don't know. But I would do that if someone else gave me a Habs jersey.
Yeah, you could borrow it from Cole, maybe Price jersey.
Yeah, or Radulov because we know he has one of those. Yeah, the only problem with that is the Habs are probably not going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah,
But
no.
we can do something else, like say Toronto plays like a Tampa Bay or a Florida and they lose, I
Mhm.
would still wear one. I think that's it.
Okay.
It's a good punishment.
Yeah, I think that's
Only in the
fair.
first round, though. Only in the first round. If they get out of the, they get out of the first round. We're going to change that up.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Did it surprise you that Chara signed a 1 day with Boston after the way they kind of parted ways a couple years ago?
I think there's enough mutual respect there between the team and him that they would allow him to come back and him not to be salty about it. Yeah, I feel like he's the ultimate professional. I don't think at the end of the day he seems like a really really smart guy. So I don't think I don't think any ill will about them letting him go when he signed in Washington that year a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'm not surprised that it happened. I mean, he's a Bruin for life. That's where he lifted the cup. That's where he had his best years in the show. So yeah, not surprised. But it did to you a little bit, or
A little bit, just because I think it was more Boston that did that a little dirty than Char. I think he wanted to come back, obviously, and they said
oh yeah,
no.
yeah,
So I assume they reached out and not Char reaching out to them because I know myself, I'm spiteful and I don't like to turn the other cheek. So I would make them, you gotta ask me to dinner. I'm not asking you. So that's the way I approach it. But I'm happy for them, for both of them. I think this is the way it should be. He got to finish where he started in Long Island. This past season, that's where he started his career in Long Island, and it was
yeah.
obviously that terrible trade to Boston that is still perplexing to me all these years later.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's gonna be in Toronto. His plaque's gonna be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and in 5 years' time when he's allowed to go in. To me, that's a no brainer. He's a first ballot, and really, he changed the position of defenseman. The way you mentioned his physicality, the way he fitness wise, I think he's been one of the biggest gurus when it comes to that, and it's unorthodox training from wrestling his father to wrestling bears in Slovakia and even just his size, right, Shay? Like you look at Victor Hedman, you look at some of the guys that are so big now. He
Mhm.
really started that trend and helped these big men get to the NHL.
Right, because he was so lanky, right? And even
Yeah.
in his younger days of playing hockey, he struggled so much getting around because obviously he's he not that he wasn't in great shape, but that he just had so much more than other players. These smaller, faster players, Martin St. Louis, the top guy to come to mind, who were just quicker because of just their sheer size. So yeah, anyone who doesn't know much about him, I highly go recommend on his life. He's a Harvard grad.
Mm-hmm.
He's a
Smart
basically a
guy.
staple in Boston as a sports figure, and then outside of sports as well. He's incredibly smart, and this is also a guy who would drop the gloves on the blink of an eye if you effed with one of his teammates. So yeah, just everything from his come up, I think, is really interesting, and another reason why I'm wearing it today.
When you look at villains for your Toronto Maple Leafs in the last 10 years, how high does he rank for you?
Oh, in the last 10 years, he'd be not uno numero, but
Right behind Marchand, maybe?
yeah, probably Marchand. I think old Cockneyami even makes that list in that OT winner he scored a couple of years ago. I would say he's top five for sure, just
Yeah.
because he did make life hell for those two back-to-back years, and obviously it does scoop into 2013 because we haven't, a decade past that's not gone by us. So that playoff memory still holds pretty deep. So I'm saying top five. I don't know exactly where he hits, but yeah, yeah, definitely scarred for life thinking about him.
Yeah, I always think back to when he sucker punched Tavares and he got him good. I thought Tavares fell to his knee and it was dirty, but they didn't call much on Z because he was just you could call basically anything, but
Yeah.
he gave John a good shot. It dropped John to his knees. I recall that. I think it was in a game 7 as well, which is even funnier.
You got to play it in, that to that point, he plays on the edge. And like, why do you think they won all those game sevens? Why do you think they were at why do you think in 2011 they won a game 7 Stanley Cup final? Is because they did have play with that edge, and look who was leading them the entire time. It was that type of play from their captain, right? So.
What was the more surprising retirement today, other than Z? Because there's 3 of them this morning. Keith Yandel or PK Subban?
I'm more surprised, not surprised by Keith Yandel. That was that was a given, I think, with his play last year. Not that I thought PK had a lot left to give, but I thought the team would give him a 1 year, maybe, 1 year veterans minimum kind of deal. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or even a PTO. But it really sounds like he's kind of given up. He wants to leave on his own terms, and he does a lot outside the sport as well, especially with they had that event this weekend. It was in Toronto.
Oh, his philanthropic work. Yeah.
Yeah.
He has
So
a foundation.
yeah. So he has a lot going on other than that. So I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I also thought he could have played 1 more year at least. What about you between the three? I guess.
Yeah. Chara, I said as it got closer to camp, I was expecting this. You know my thoughts on Keith Yandel. I give myself the credit for retiring him because nobody criticized him more than me, and he's been pretty god awful for a number of years now. So sorry, spitting chicklets, but that's just the truth. You got a regular guest now that has free time. When it comes to PK, I would say I think he definitely could still play for sure because he's better than a lot of these fifth, sixth defensemen in the league on
Mm-hmm.
every team. I could name you a fifth, sixth defenseman on every team currently, and I think PK is better than that
Right.
player. I think for him, I think he's gonna have media opportunities. I think ESPN will likely want to hire him to
That's
do
true.
hockey coverage. I could see him going into movies, Shay. I could see him
Really.
being a guy. It's the guys you least expect from these sports. I find that get into these movies, get into these positions. It wouldn't surprise me. He's got a big personality. Maybe it's not film, but he's in like reality television. He dated Lindsey Vaughn. He's always seems to have something on the go, if you will. I see him having a bigger second career than his first career.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Especially the last number of years. No, he'd be a great host. I'm sure he could host. If he was on ESPN, I could see him up on the panel. No offense to Biz Nasty, but I'm sure PK probably has a little bit more experience playing on the ice, so he might be better suited for that role. So.
Who's your? This is branching off, but who's your of all those U.S. panels last year? Who was your
Mm-hmm.
least favorite?
Oh, well, obviously I didn't watch a lot. I can't really like say, but without, I'm always watching the, Sportsnet, TSN, and all those guys, but
Who's your least favorite on Sportsnet?
all of them. They're all pretty brutal. Not gonna lie. I mean, it's suffered. I mean, it's no shock to anybody that Sportsnet and TSN have both suffered over the last, I would say, 5 years.
Yeah.
They're not great panels. They hardly get good content. Even listening to a guy like Mike Johnson, I have a lot of respect for Gord Miller, who did the World Juniors this year, but him and Mike Johnson, that was not great. Not great to listen to. Almost tough. I almost pulled a U and went, no vocals. I just just the screen and my thoughts.
Right. Yeah, I find that it's tough. Like the media business is changing always, and you're trying to find big names. Like they got Gretzky in the States. That didn't really work because he didn't give an opinion. He's such a nice guy, which is the
Yeah.
worst thing you can be in this business. Like it's better to be mean or crusty, like yours truly. But I think Biz Nasty is good at the job. Surprisingly, I don't love their podcast, as you know. We've talked about this many times, but I think he's good at being himself and just kind of embracing that gimmick, if you will, if I can use a wrestling term. I think Jeff O'Neill is good when it comes to just being the O dog and doing those kind of things.
Yeah.
But I'm with you when it comes to panels. I think a lot of these great players, even some great interviewers, aren't getting into the media. Like I think of a guy that might surprise you that I think will be a really good analyst if he wants to get into the sport. That Nick Foligno. He's one of the best interviews I've heard, and I think he'd be great on a panel. I think he'd be good at working for a media company. And I'm kind of hoping he's a guy that when he hangs him up, which should be shortly, you could see him in a media position.
Yeah, I mean, former captain. He seems to know a lot. He's played a long time. He's played over 1,000 games for sure. So yeah, I could
Mm-hmm.
see that. He has. He does. I've heard a couple of his interviews as well, and he's got a great personality and great stories. So yeah,
Yeah,
I could see that. I mean, his brother plays. His father played in the NHL. Like, I mean, he's
right.
just a hockey guy, right? So no, that'd be good. Tortorella was good. He just come to mind because I have him down on paper for something we'll talk about later. But
Right.
he was good because I love just his personality. So anytime you're watching him, you're gonna hear a hot take, and he's not gonna care, like you said about being mean or crusty.
Before we get to Blake Wheeler, we talked about Sonny Milano last week with PTOs and how he was
Mm-hmm.
still waiting for a deal. He had ended up having to take a PTO from the Calgary Flames after a career year, I might add. That to me, Calgary is going to get a player. They're going to sign him. I'd be shocked if they didn't after training camp. But that's got to be a little deflating for Sonny Milano to have a career season. You had that incredible goal with you and Zegras where people kind of remembered your name again.
Mm.
And now you're on a PTO in Calgary. I'm surprised he didn't get a 1 year deal from somebody.
Yeah, even more so with Anaheim. You thought they had good chemistry there, and they don't. Like, it's not
Right.
like they have a lot going on either. They're probably desperate for wingers. So it even more so speaks to how much they wanted to part ways with the forward, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a good look. I mean, Calgary is definitely not a bad location. It's colder, obviously, than old Anaheim. You got some, oh, for a second there, it looked like you were sipping on one of those dishwasher fluid things. It's getting
Uh-huh.
all shaped out. I was worried.
It's okay, everybody. It's an Evian. It's
Yeah,
Evian.
yeah. But no, yeah, that's you're right. I know we spoke about this last week, but he's a forward that can generate offense. His defense lacks, which I
Mm-hmm.
think him and Tortorella probably got into it a couple of times in Columbus. But yeah, I could definitely see him there, and it's a good ad as a third line winger. And I don't think it's a bad signing at all, and really good for Calgary for not taking a chance, but seeing an opportunity for a player that could put up potential points down low
Right.
in the
Yeah. You
line.
see, Anisimov got a PTO.
Yeah, I saw
Bers-
that. Forgot he's
Broussard, a bunch of guys that are kind of on their
Del
last leg.
Cole.
Yeah, Del Cole. He hasn't even had a leg yet, but he's getting a PTO. They're bouncing around. Yeah, tough story with Nolan Patrick. I read yesterday he's going to miss the entire season. I think his career is over, Shay, quite
Me too.
frankly. When it comes to these head injuries, you can't play around with those. He's had multiple concussions. It's too bad because he had a lot of talent. He went second overall in a draft. I feel bad for the kid. Like I really feel bad for him that he never really got a chance to play in the NHL.
Yeah, this was a guy in his draft year that got hurt once. It felt like, or he might have had concussion issues prior to that, but really that's where it seemed to stem from. And right from then, for Philly, never worked. Vegas, hardly, it was really a cup of coffee there, but he could hardly stay healthy. So yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like it's an opportunity where he needs to, for his own health, maybe step away from the game, which obviously, I mean, it's his dream, but you kind of have to think about what your life will be like down the road. I mean, it's scary to think about, but we remember what happened to Sidney Crosby and his head injuries, and there was a point where people thought he might not play ever again. Um, and ultimately, he did come back, but sometimes it's not that case, right?
Yeah, and Alex Turcotte with LA, I read as well. He may miss the entire. He's another who's taken fifth overall. His career might be done. So some unfortunate stuff for young players that really didn't get a chance to break in. Another big news of the day: Nathan McKinnon signs a record extension, 8 years, $100.8 million extension with the Colorado Avalanche, 12.6 million per season, 100 grand more than Connor McDavid, I might add, which makes him the highest paid player in the National Hockey League. McDavid's been the highest paid player for a number of years now. So we have a new bar. What do you make of the deal and that he gets just a 100 grand more than 97?
Oh, old Joe Blow went to him and said, you're a good player, Mac Dog. We'll give you the same. And he said, Nah, you're gonna have to bump me up a little bit. I need to be the highest guy. I like it, but I like it because the player is good. But at the same time, I think you just limit yourself on maybe winning that second cup again. I mean, just because it's so tough. Like obviously, no, not a shocker, but the cap is going to go up in the next few years. That's just a given. I think we're done with that. I think it's going to continue to rise, so that will help. But at the same time, it's like God, like you're not really at the same level as McKinnon, or sorry, you're not at the same level as McDavid, but you're making the same amount of money, and you kind of in your prime now. It's not like you're gonna get any better, which means you're paying for a McDavid type player, and you're not getting that. Is the way I see it. So I look at it a little bit negative, maybe a little too much negative, but at the same time, if they're willing to give it to him, you got to take it. I mean, that's just a given.
Yeah, he's my thing is he earned it. I look at guys like Taves and Kane, and people complain about those contracts. They won 3 cups, so at least they won you something. He won the cup last year. He gets this big extension. He earned it. Point all these guys. I look at some of these other big contracts. Matthews, Marner. Those are 2 names that are real high on the salary list that come to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Pasternak. Well, Pasternak doesn't make that much money. I don't know why I threw him in there.
Yeah,
He's cheap. He's a cheap player.
Ovechkin, those
Oh,
guys.
Huberdeau.
Yeah.
Some of these guys, they haven't won anything, and they get big money. I at least can justify it because you won something that you got that big money. And I agree to your point. I think you see leagues. I think you see the NBA where you have a guy like Jalen Brown. He could sign an extension with the Celtics right now. He's not going to do it because he thinks the salary cap's going to rise. They're going to get a new media deal. Salaries are going to skyrocket. NBA players are going to be making $60 million a year the next 2-3 years. There's a prediction it's going to happen. I think the NHL is never going to be like that. But I think like you said, this pandemic is over. Joe Biden said it on Sunday in 60 Minutes. Finally, 8 months too late, but he said it. Way to go! And
He was probably sleeping before that. So.
yeah, he probably was. He probably was sleeping. But I think they bank on it going up, like you said, and hopefully more per year than $1 million.
Yeah. I can see it in the next couple of years going up 2 million, at a time. You know what I mean? Like two, 3 million, just so you can sign these players more. There's obviously better teams, but then there's more happening throughout the league. You don't want these quiet off seasons where no one's moving around, no one's getting signed. You want these big names because it for the sport anyways, because it's going to generate that talk that hockey needs. And I in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm a little cheesed because McKinnon was one of those guys who said, "Oh, I don't care about money. Like I'm going to sign another low contract deal," and then he goes and signed this. But he said that prior to winning the cup, so it does kind of weigh out a little bit. It's like, okay, well, I ultimately accomplished the goal I probably set out, which was to bring the city its third cup, which he did. But I'm still a little cheesed by him saying that he would sign a team friendly deal and then does the exact opposite. So hey, but to each their own. They're still going to be a good team next year, and they're still going to be a contender probably. So
Yeah, he's still on that cheaper deal this year, so it gives them
yeah,
that flexibility to be. One thing I will say, I think this puts pressure on Colorado, and it's a good pressure. Joe Sakic knows how to deal with pressure. He dealt with it as a player. He's done it as a GM. They got pressure this year to compete because, like you mentioned, that salary is going from 6 to 12
yeah,
in a season. So we got flexibility now. I don't make a whole lot of money right now. Go get more players. Trade
mm-hmm.
deadline, let's go get them. If our goaltending situation doesn't work out, let's go get one. You find solutions to these problems because I think Colorado going into this season, I think I looked yesterday on FanDuel, they're the betting favorite to win the Stanley Cup, which I have no reason to think the otherwise why they shouldn't be because yes, they've lost Kadri, they've lost pieces, but to me, the team that won the cup the year before should be the favorite until another team emerges. Tampa's been to 3 straight cups. Last year, they were doubted throughout the whole year. They got there. They didn't win it, but they did get to the third straight Stanley Cup. So I think for Colorado, they are still in a good position, and their management should have some good pressure on them to go all in and try to win again this year.
Yeah, Joe will bite too. It's not like he's one of those guys who's going to be reserved, and if he feels his team needs it, he'll go out and get it. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah. Do you like? I like the way they set up their contracts though, Shay, because you got Rantanen. They set everybody up where you could you could go up the ladder. You have Rantanen and you have Landeskog and you have McCarr, and the best players make the money they should probably make. Like McCarr's the best defenseman in the NHL. He makes a really good salary.
Mm-hmm.
McKinnon is a top 3 to 5 player, however you want to rank him. He makes that level of pay. So I will say they did that correctly, where they distributed their funds to to the players correctly. I find.
And the core is locked in for quite a while, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not like they have any worries. You gel with those guys. You've always seen now you have success with them. You could easily see them building around those players, and even if it doesn't happen in the next few years, well, 4 or 5 years down the road, those guys are still going to be there. Besides Landeskog, they're still going to be young and
Mm-hmm.
competing. So you can still, not I don't want to say wash away, but you can still have a couple not great seasons and then come back and still be competitive, which is something you see with the Blackhawks. They signed the guys when they were younger, and then they kept that core group together. One, they won one in 2010, and then they went back in 2015. That's a long period, but I can see the same thing happening with a team like Colorado.
Yeah, certainly. They have what it takes to get back, in my mind, and really compete for a long time. Let's move to Winnipeg, same division.
Mm.
It's Friday. I haven't touched on this yet. Well, really, I think management did this, but they had the coach come out and say, Rick Bonus, that Blake Wheeler was being stripped of his captaincy, although they didn't say that. They said they're looking at different leaders, which is a stupid bullshit way of saying we don't want Blake Wheeler to be our captain anymore. But
Mm.
they're going to have multiple assistant captains. Blake Wheeler has been the captain in Winnipeg since 2016. They had a really awkward press conference. Mark Scheifele was in Vegas. He had to get off the bird to answer questions from people about this. What do you make of the developments in Winnipeg?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because you heard the shakeup last year. Paul Maurice leaves. There's something, I mean, it's been a while where something lingering and it stinks in this team, right? So I really think it was only a matter of time before either a big player was traded or something like this was going to happen where, okay, we got to make a change in the locker room. I don't know if this applies to you, and I've heard this a couple times this week, and I have to agree with it. I don't really think letters on the jerseys always imply who the leaders are in the room.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a leader, you're going to be a leader. There's not one guy in there. It's not John Tavares for the Leafs walking around pointing fingers and giving the speeches. No, there's guys like Giordano, guys like Jake Muzzin. Those are leaders in the locker room for the Leafs, and that's just my perspective. But there's leaders in this locker room too who've been there for a while, and maybe there is a culture change that's going to happen. Wheeler is 36, so he's not a spring chicken anymore. His numbers are okay, but his defensive play is lacked, which is really why I think it's time for him to move on from being the captain.
He's not the player he used to be, for sure. I think his attitude's been pretty crappy over the last couple of years. I mean, they had a coach quit on the team last year.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't tell you everything you need to know. Then nothing will. Paul Maurice quit. The team had a disastrous year. Winnipeg's been one of the more underachieving teams to me in the last 5 years. I thought they could have really gotten to a Stanley Cup final, competed for one. They're kind of like San Jose, where San Jose was always so close. I thought they could maybe get over the top, and they never did. I don't mind this because I think they look at it, and I think you also got to look and say, if Winnipeg had in a perfect world, Blake Wheeler wouldn't be on the Winnipeg Jets anymore. I don't think Winnipeg wants him on their roster, but nobody's going to take that contract, and he's got a no move.
Mm-hmm.
Another good idea. Give no move to everybody on the roster, which makes it tough to make deals. But you can't give it to Scheifele because Scheifele's probably leaving in a year, and Scheifele's been ornery the past basically year and a half in Winnipeg. I don't mind this move, but it's awkward to say the least that Wheeler is still in there. What I will put is I think this is a shovel day off decision. I think it's on Rick Bonus, the new coach, to bring it back in and not make it so awkward when everybody shows up to training camp tomorrow. It's on him to create a better culture, to create a more favorable place for all the players so you can have a better environment.
If Cheveldayoff left this on Bonus's shoulders to say, you got to make this decision, we need a culture change, do you think he goes in and takes that seat from him?
I think Cheveldayoff told Bonus this was going to happen when he hired him.
Yeah. Oh no, I'd say, but I'm just saying, is this Bonus, like if he left it to Bonus's decision as a new coach just arriving, do you think he would do that, or do you think it's?
I think Wheeler would still be the captain.
You think you still? So you don't think he caused that much? We'll call it. I don't know which one call it, dandruff in the locker room, because it's it's filthy.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. But I think it takes a lot of balls for a coach to do that.
Okay.
And it can, in particular, if you take a C from Wheeler, and you remember in San Jose when they took it from Marlowe and they took it from Thornton and they took it from, and they put it on Pavelski, like it was just so awkward.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the team seemed to find it. They seemed to play okay. But I think if you take it from Wheeler and you're not giving it to Scheifele, who's getting it? Like I don't know who the captain of the team is. It Nate Schmidt?
Yeah, Dylan DeMello actually on the back end. He seems like he's a valid option, former senator. Yeah, no, I mean it's good that they automatically said, listen, we're going to play no captain this year. We're just going to have a collective group of leaders, and that kind of goes back to my point earlier. I think there already is a collective group of leaders, so I really think this is even more a shot at Blake Wheeler. It's like, okay, we're just evening the playing field and not letting you. I guess I have have the only voice in the room. So
right.
Yeah, it does just seems a little silly, but at the same time, management is doing. They think they're doing a business move by doing this, and who knows? Maybe it pisses Wheeler off. Maybe he plays better, or he can come in with the opposite attitude. Like, I don't want to be here. I'm gonna mope around. I'm gonna throw some terrible passes up the middle and just be a shithead. So we'll see. We'll talk about it later, I guess, when we talk about the stories of this upcoming season. But this has got to be one, really. And there's it was like no change to the roster either, right? Like the thing that happened in Winnipeg's offseason besides this is signing Dubois to a 1-year deal where he's still an RFA at the end of the deal. So, what's going to happen with this team? You have the same culture that you had for the last couple of years, but ultimately there's no shift in the room.
Right. You have Wheeler, who's pissed off, probably doesn't want to be there. Scheifele, who's got a year left, who's pissed off, probably doesn't want to be there that much. Wishes he was in Boston. You have, like you mentioned, Dubois, whose only reason he's still there is because Montreal's tanking and they don't have the cap space for him right now. So they got to get rid of some contracts.
Basically.
So your three best Ehlers is better than Wheeler, but Ehlers is under contract. Everybody else is their best forward group, best players are basically not happy to be there.
Yeah.
That doesn't scream success this year. And I think the best thing Winnipeg can hope for is Connor Hellebuyck has a bounce back year. He wasn't great last year. He seems to have an all-star year, and then he has a year where he's below average.
Mm-hmm.
So what his career would tell us is this year he's going to be fantastic, which I think their defense score has improved. I think it again, he struggled last year. I think their defense score is pretty good. I joked about Nate Schmidt. I think he is a good defenseman. You mentioned Dylan DeMello. He's very much defensive defenseman, but he can make things happen. I like Neil Pionk a lot. Morrissey's stable back there. So I think their defense forward group is okay, but Hellebuyck is the key for Winnipeg to have some, sustained success this year.
Yeah, for Rick Bonus's sake, I hope that's the key. He's a good coach, and I'm surprised he's still coaching at like 70. He must be almost 75 now. So
you go from Dallas and you're 70 years old and you want to move to Winnipeg and freeze your ass off for the whole damn winter, but must love the sport. I'll give him that. I give him credit for doing that. Let's move to storylines heading into the NHL season. So for everybody that doesn't know, training camp's open tomorrow. We're starting to hear some stories around the NHL. We mentioned injuries. Heard from Philly where Couturier might be hurt long term, might not be. That's kind of up in the air. And he said like a week ago he was healthy, so there you go. His health is always right on par. Ryan Ellis is again, he's a guy that's going to miss some time. But I thought we'd go through the league, and you can talk. I got some storylines written down. You can go through your list of teams and different players. You know, it
Okay.
can be about management, whatever you think is interesting. So why don't you start us off? What's one storyline that really interests you?
Well, we'll stick on the Philadelphia topic because it is interesting. It's getting Tortorella, it's getting that locker room and mix things up. I think it's very fascinating considering he's taking the year off. Is he going to come back with the same approach and mindset that he always has? And that's, kind of be hard on his guys, be tough on them, and, sometimes get the most out of them, which is push players away like Dubois, or it's real players in sometimes to play their very best. So I think it's going to be really good. Like I said, like you just said, actually, it's if this team is healthy, I mean, they do have weapons. Couturier he's a top center in this league when he's healthy. He's great on both ends of the ice. He can generate offense, and he can be that ultimate monster on the PK. And their back end's not half bad either. You said it, Ellis. They're going to have Tony DeAngelo this year. They're going to have Provorov. They're going to have Ristolainen. It's not a bad back end. And then if you got the big guy in the net, Carter Hart, if he switches it around, he's a young goaltender. So I'm very interested to see how he gels with a guy like Tortorella. Is Tortorella going to send him overboard, or is he, maybe he'll pull a Ron Hextall and just start fucking beating everybody? It could be interesting. So yeah, that's one of my main stories I'm looking forward to. And Philadelphia's been such garbage the last couple of years that for their fan base, I kind of hope they even have a little bit of a comeback here.
Yeah, I don't have as much faith as you. I don't really love the roster. Carter Hart is the X factor because he's been god awful since he got to the NHL. Really inconsistent. He was touted as the next Price. He's basically been the next Justin Pogge since he got in the league, which has just been an afterthought. I will say Tony DeAngelo and Torts is so appealing to
Oh
me.
yes.
It's like a cold Corona on a hot day. It's just those two. If D'Angelo was giving no effort with Rob Brendamore in that game 7, which he didn't when that game was out of hand, that's not going to work with Torts. Torts nearly killed Pierre-Luc Dubois on his way out the door. These two are either going to get along great because Tony DeAngelo is going to bring it every night, or Torts is going to grind his ass into the ground because these two are both hotheads. D'Angelo is not afraid to get in anybody's face, and Torts will not back down from anyone. So that alone intrigues me. I also think Ristolainen and Torts could be a fun little pair because Ristolainen loves a cupcake up the middle about as much as anybody, and
Oh
his give a
yes.
shit meter is not always the highest RPM. So this defense core and Torts, I think, will have an interesting relationship, in particular in the early going of this season.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's riveting to think about. To have Torts, you said it, I think earlier. Torts is good for the league. He's a good
Yeah.
thing to have in the league because he's an easy soundbite, and he's going to have a couple freakouts every single year.
Yes, I mean his legendary freak out in Vancouver, his New York banter with
His FU
Brooksy.
match with Dubois on the bench
Yeah,
in Columbus.
he's great. I mean, I think he should be in the Hockey Hall of Fame when his career's over, just based on his career. And he won a Stanley Cup, which is forgotten. It's been almost
Yeah.
20 years, but he did win one. But no, Philly is intriguing to me. I don't know how good they'll be, but I have them as I agree with you. I'm gonna go for my first one. Jason Robertson is a great player for the Dallas
Hmm.
Stars. 40 goals last year, breakout year, the better Robertson. He's a restricted free agent. He doesn't have a contract. That's just under the radar. It's not talked about. Training camp starts tomorrow. I get it. It's Dallas, but he's a great player, and I'm looking at it, and why isn't this being talked about? So Jason Robertson not signed yet with the Stars, and they don't have a whole lot of cap room. So they're gonna have to move some pieces around to bring him in. So that's a story to watch for me.
Yeah, yeah, very fascinating. If this was in Montreal or Toronto, this would be top line every single day until he gets signed, kind of like Nylander a couple of years ago when when he wouldn't come back on time. Yeah, I know it is fascinating. Like you said, they're restricted on what they can do. Ultimately see this coming down to a 1 year deal where he takes less money in that time frame, just so he can. They're going to have some extinct contracts. I think at the end of that, Joe Pavelski's only on for 1 more year, and there's probably a few other guys I'm thinking about.
And Ben are on the last years as well.
Yeah, there you go. So like it's like, hey, come back. We know you deserve it, the money, but come back and play 1 more year. We'll see what we can do with these guys, and then we'll pay you. We'll pay you because it's not, that wasn't a one-off year last year. He did score 40 goals. He played on a really good line, but ultimately he is a really good player. So he should get paid like one. I agree with you, and he is the better Robertson.
Yeah, it's not a big fight there, but I have
Not
to
a
throw
take,
it in
yeah.
every time because you never hear about him. And you hear about the 5'4" guy that's an American League hockey player. But I joke, but he is American. He is an American leaguer. He's not 5'4",
Not
not
wrong.
5'6", but he is a American leaguer. But yeah, Dallas. Pete DeBoer is their new head coach. I think their team's pretty good. They re-signed their goalie in the offseason. I think he's going to be a star. Their
Yeah.
young goaltender. I mean, Sagan and Ben are not what they used to be. Unfortunately, they're still on the roster for the Stars because they leave a lot to be desired. But we'll see what they can do. What's another storyline that you're following?
Another one I'll say, well, this is obviously relevant here in Canada, but the new look on the Calgary Flames. I mean, you could pinpoint a couple players, but for one, having Kadri back in Canada, I think is good for the sport. He's going to be easy to advertise. He's got his ring, and inserting him into a place like Alberta where, it's just all hockey. There's nothing else to do in Alberta. Sorry for anyone who's listening. You just watch hockey and you talk about hockey nonstop. And he left Toronto maybe because he didn't have, obviously he was traded, didn't have any say in what was happening, but he probably was a big relief to leave a place like Toronto. So now he's going to re-enter a place where that's all they talk about. And seeing him, go head to head with two of the best players in the world in the match of Alberta is going to be unbelievable to see as well. Obviously, Huberdeau, what he's going to bring to that series. And ultimately, the Flames had a pretty good year last year. Not that it was a big surprise. They did have a strong lineup, but are they going to be able to repeat that success with these couple new pieces?
Flames are, top of the list for credit on their offseason and also what they're going to look like this year with a great goaltender in Jacob Markstrom,
Yeah.
an elite center in Elias Lindholm. You have Kadri, who's another center you can put in. You also got Backlund, who's sneaky good. You had Huberdeau, who is just a regular season points machine. He has been basically his entire career. Mangiapane, who's a sneaky little goal scorer. They got a good roster there. I think Dylan Dubé still has still has some meat on that bone. I think he's a little more to bring offensively when it comes to his game. But I like, you mentioned Uyghur's a secret sneaky ad on that trade as well, so he improves their back end. And you got Kadri and you have Evander Kane are going to play each other 5 times a year in Edmonton. That's fun. Those two guys don't like each other. Kadri just doesn't like the team's rival. He doesn't need a motivation to hate a team. Like he joined Colorado, he hated St. Louis. Like that's just the way it works. He doesn't need to be bought in. He'll just hate the other team because
It's his
also
nature. Yeah.
Edmonton injured him in the series
That's
in the
right.
conference final. So I think he'll want some retribution. And I'm looking it's fun when you can say the Battle of Alberta, even the Battle of Ontario, I might add, has something that is appealing about it. Ottawa's been terrible forever. Edmonton's been underwhelming for a long time, other than McDavid. I think both Calgary and Edmonton should be good. And I think Ottawa and Toronto will both be competitive. So in Canada, those two rivalries may be back.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is good. Obviously good for us. We go into Edmonton for a second. Have you brought up the PTO that Edmonton's giving Jake Virtanen? It's just a shot to this podcast, I think, every time he's relevant again in the news.
Well, first of all, Jake Virtanen gets a pro tryout from Edmonton after being accused of rape and a bunch of other things in Russia. Didn't have sufficient evidence. Doesn't mean it didn't happen because it's Russia. Look at Brittany Griner. I hate the player. I'm not gonna. I can't stand the guy. I think his character sucks. I think his play on the ice sucks. I don't think he deserves another chance. His character stinks. I can't go much deeper into my. He's not DW, but he is. And I'm not referencing my father. I do like him. He gets my nerves
I
sometimes,
was
but I
gonna
do
say.
love him. But I'm mentioning that clown show from that team you used to root for, that lost to the Jets this weekend. But yeah, I don't think it's necessary. I hope he doesn't make the team, quite frankly, but he will. But he adds bite. He's a him and they like convicts, Kane, him. So
Well, that's what I was going to bring up is like it was already kind of a little bit of a risky move bringing in Kane last year with everything that he's done. He might be even more controversial in some ways than Vertanen.
yeah,
And now you're going to give a PTO to this guy who's obviously got a past, he's got let go of his team, and then on top of that, he's not 1/5 the player Evander Kane is.
no, not even
So it's
close.
like, why are you taking a chance on a guy that you might make your team 0.5% better? You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I texted a few people this after I saw this. I'm like, what is Ken Holland doing? But ultimately, maybe it comes down to winning games is more important than the image of the team. So yeah, I just had to bring that up because it'll be a topic of discussion this year, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And it's two guys that are really checkered past. Like that's risky business. To add those two in the same locker room. So I don't trust Kane at all. I don't trust Vertan. I trust Vertanen less. Quite frankly, I trust Kane about this much. So that it's scary. I think the Sens are an also big storyline.
Yeah.
They made a lot of changes. The Brinket comes in. They add Giroux for actually a decent number, I thought, in free agency. They added Cam Talbot in net, so you have a stable goaltending duo with him and Anton Forsberg. You re-signed Josh Norris. You re-signed Tim Stutzla. I like their team. I still think it's got holes. I don't think they're a contender yet, but I'm curious to see how they look this year with all the changes they've made.
Yeah, I don't think Pierre's going to get stopped booing for a little while yet, but no, I do think that he's made some good moves, and I don't see them being a contender next year. But I do see them getting a slight bit better, and then I see them progressing into that level where they keep taking a step up for the next 3 years. I realize Giroux might not be with the team when they are competitive, but that's an experience. I mean, that's a captain, a guy who's played in the Stanley Cup Finals, and ultimately a guy who is going to make your locker room better. I think quality wise, and it's ultimately a step up from what you had last year, which was pretty much garbage. Your quote is 2 years away from 2 years away. This
Yep.
team could actually be 2 years away from being a playoff team, which is very fascinating.
I think the best case scenario this year, and I think this will happen, they will be playing meaningful games in March, which they haven't done since 2017.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When they're
Being
winning.
in a playoff hunt, if you will, being in the 6 to 8 point range. You're the Baltimore Orioles. I think if they could have that type of year, I think they'd take that this season.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a step in the anywhere from where they were the last couple of years. I think is a step in the right direction. But competing for a wild card spot is by no means a bad thing when you're a team like Ottawa.
And if Stutzla can make that jump, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. If he could have an 80-point year, if he could be a point per game this year, if Norris could get 70, 80 points, Batherson has 70, say 65, 70, Shabbat continues to grow. That, like you said, they're growing, they're getting better, and you add on to it, and maybe in 2023, 2024, they are a playoff team because Boston's getting old. The Leafs are changing. They got to have a new GM if this season doesn't go right, as we'll talk about in a second here. And Boston's getting old. I think Florida's tricky. I'm not sure how. I think they might regress this year a little bit. I still think they make the playoffs, but they won't be as good as they were last year. Tampa, they're still there, but again, it's a little unknown. So I think Ottawa's on the come up.
Yeah, and that's a good point for talking about Boston. I have one of my storylines is, and this progresses maybe into the next couple of years, not just this year, but the last kind of stance we'll see with Boston, Washington, and Pittsburgh, and
Mm,
this last hurrah of Sidney Crosby and Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom, TJ Oshie, and all these players for Boston. Patrice Bergeron. This is ultimately, I think, his last season with Boston.
Yes.
Because I feel like it took a lot to convince him to come back, and I think it took bringing back David Krejci and getting rid of I was going to say Sweeney, but don't tell me Brucey boy, Bruce Cassidy, and, getting rid of Bruce Cassidy to bring him back. So that's not going to last long either. I think that these teams have a short window, and ultimately there's teams behind them that are going to be itching: Buffalo, Detroit, and Ottawa. So yeah, it's we're in a changing zone where these teams are going to start fading away, and other teams are going to start stepping into those spots.
Agreed. I'm going to be one to bring this up because I just want to throw you a change up. I'll bring up the Leafs. They're interesting somewhat to me. I think their goaltending is interesting. It could be great. It could be a colossal tire fire. And I also think Kyle Dubas is on the last year of his contract. If they lose in the first round again, he's fired. Is that 100% lock? You with me?
I think it's a lock. Yeah. Well, I mean, like there was everyone saying last year, oh, he's done. Get this guy out of here if they don't make it, and they didn't make the round. But I think with the team they played and how they played, he bought himself one more year basically by doing so. Yeah, and not getting a goaltender and then bringing over your what was it? Sioux Greyhounds, whatever that.
Yeah. St. Marie.
Yes. Yeah. So by bringing over Matt Murray, I think that's his last straw. It's like, okay, your little reunion here didn't work. We're gonna have to find somebody new, and from there, it's like, who fills those shoes? Who's gonna be able to get us over the hump?
Yeah, I think Dubas and Keefe are both fired. If they lose in the first round again this year, I could make an argument if they lose in the second round, they might be both fired, but people will likely take that as a Stanley Cup, so maybe they won't.
I know I will.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. They make it to the second round, they'll be the best thing since sliced bread. But yeah, Matt Murray Samsonov is so because it's polarizing. I think you're either Matt Murray stinks or Matt Murray is the guy who won a Stanley Cup in 2017. I don't think there's a middle ground on the takes, on Leaf fans, on these crazy Facebook message boards or on Twitter, which Leaf fans are fucking crazy on. But I think it's so positive or so negative. Like there isn't a middle ground. Am I wrong with that? Because you're in the fandom. So do you think there is a middle ground, or am I correct in my assumption?
I do have to say that there's got to be a little bit of middle ground, only because it's been so long since we've seen Matt Murray be competitive that I cannot see the jump from being, just stale to, fresh bread. I honestly have to see, something in between that, because I can't see him just popping up and being good. But who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe he's the missing piece that we've been waiting for, and Dubas is the only one with glasses to see that.
Right.
Samsonov is interesting too. I mean, this guy, he did get a look in Washington. No one's going to say, oh, he never got a full chance. Yeah, he got a couple of years to be a number one goaltender. Is he young? Yeah, he's still pretty young. But, he did. It's not like we know a little bit about what he's about. So, it's going to be interesting.
Interesting one for me because I expect him to have more success this year than Matt Murray.
As a backup or as a starter?
Starter.
As a starter, okay. This is a big debate.
I expect him to start game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, well, this is what this week is great for. We're starting to get to training. We're going to have preseason games, and we're going to see who's playing better ultimately. I mean, that's the great thing about this age of media. Everything's leaked. Everything's going to be, unless you're the Detroit Red Wings, where I'm sure you're not allowed. Your phones get dropped off at the door. Yeah, the Islanders too. Yeah. That'd be like if they ever had a preseason game before the preseason, then no one would ever know, because it'd just be phones at the doors, media members not allowed. No, just coaches, management. That's it.
Let me ask you this: before even the season starts, do you expect Matt Murray to be? Let me put it this way: do you expect Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov to have a top 10 combined goals against and save percentage this upcoming season? Combined.
Oh, No, because I think Samsonov will probably be a little bit better, but I feel like I just have a gut feeling that Matt Murray is going to be god awful. And I'm usually wrong, which is great, for being on this podcast. But as a fan, I hope I'm wrong, but I just have a god awful feeling that Murray is just going to collapse, unfortunately.
I kind of worry about that with Giordano.
I see. I have
Don't
more
get me
faith
wrong.
in Giordano than I do with those two doughheads.
He was bad at the end of the year last year, Shay. He ran out of gas. He looked like an old man. Like he was been bald for 10 years, but he was balder last year.
Yeah. Well, the problem is it's not like they have a good seventh defenseman to play, so he's not going to get steady rotation. He's going to have to play a lot of games because Sandin's not liking the money that's on the table.
And Muzzin's going to get hurt.
Muzzin's, yeah. Well, it's given that one of the Leafs are going to get hurt early in the year and probably stay hurt for quite a while. It just seems to be the way the last couple of years. The only guy who seems to be there all the time, unfortunately, fortunately or fortunately, how you see it, is TJ Brody. He's probably been one of the more consistent D-man since signing there.
Mm-hmm. He's been a good signing in Toronto. He's steady. He's consistent. I give him that. Yeah, that's an interesting team, and I think they're going to score a lot of goals because they're great at that. I think they'll have great offensive numbers, but I'm curious to see where it goes in the back end and what kind of production they get from their bottom six forwards because I don't think they're particularly deep at that position either. You have another storyline?
I do. I have a couple more. I'll put my top one out there. I was going to say ASU, but that's hardly a storyline. I think that's more of a joke at this point.
Yes.
I'll say the shit show in Las Vegas. I think it's interesting. And it's interesting for one reason, or multiple reasons, but one in my mind is the fan support. If they stink, are these fans going to back this team? That's a question for you, by the way. That's not just a statement.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know because we haven't seen it. They've never
I
been.
know. That's the thing.
The Raiders haven't been terrible yet since they've always been decent since they've gone to Vegas. I don't think it'll be great. I don't think it'll be well received. Let me put it that way because American attendance in general at hockey games is not great,
Mm-hmm.
and a team could be really good and people don't show up. So I don't I don't think it'll be real. I don't think it'll be real well received in Vegas. What'll help them is people from Toronto will go watch them because it's in Vegas once a year. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure the home crowd is going to show up if they're 10 points out in mid-February.
Yeah, well, to me, that's the thing. There's so much there's like Vegas, there's a billion things going on. It's like New York City. Well, you don't want to go watch hockey, and well, I have like 50 other things I could be doing right now.
Right.
That's what Vegas feels like to me. You want to go play the slots, go watch a show, go watch a Raiders game. Like you said, why am I going to watch this team stinking up on the ice? They have some incredible players, Mark Stone, Petrangelo, Jack Eichel. The talent is still there by far. It's just, yeah, if they start to lose and they're used to this winning culture that they've sustained for 5-6 years now, is it going to work? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I think Eichel's another fascinating guy to see what he does this year after a year out from his surgery. What kind of production can he come back to being a guy that was taken second overall and
Yeah.
have the type of production? Is he still that player? I think he can be, but he's certainly got to prove it again because he's been, out of the limelight for the last number of years. But also at Vegas, they got more pressure because Calgary's better, Edmonton got better.
Yeah, LA's better.
Kevin
Yeah.
Fiala, it's a sneaky good. He's another one of my storylines. I think his production this year, I think he could have a real big year for Los Angeles. I think they got better. Anaheim's not going to be great. Obviously, you got ASU right off. So you got some bad teams, but I do think multiple teams around them got better while they stayed the same, or you could argue got worse with Robin Leonard not being available.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. It means that they're going to have to tighten up a lot defensively. They've signed Aiden Hill like you said a while back, but they're going to have to tighten up defensively, and their decor is going to be really good if they want to be competitive. Is the only way I can see them being a playoff team.
Agreed. Do you have any worries about Georgiev in Colorado? That's a storyline for me just because he is not proven to be a starter. He's been
Yeah.
a mediocre backup goalie, and he's now their number one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, for those reasons, like you just said, there's really no reason to trust a guy. But he's he's mid 20s. He's shown potential to be a half decent goalie at times. He's played some good games. But yeah, it's a lot jumping from not being a starter to just being one right away, and on top of that, with so much pressure from a team that just won the Stanley Cup. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
it's it's like it's if you're jumping to Arizona, if you're jumping to Seattle to play, well, not a ton of pressure, obviously, but now that you're going to one of the better teams in the league, it's like, okay, well, there's a certain level, there's a certain expectation that you are going to perform like the last guy did, and that's just
yes.
ultimately a given.
Yeah,
Uh,
you see guys either love it or kind of embrace it. Like Antti Niemi won that cup in Chicago. His career was never the same after that. He wasn't as good of a goalie. And you have guys that kind of jump into that. Corey Crawford kind of embraced being on a good team. He found it. He had success in that location after being an unproven guy. Tuukka Rask, to that point, embraced it in Boston, where Timmy Thomas was the guy. He was sitting on the bench. He had a good career until he retired. So I'm curious to see Georgiev. He moves around well. He's really athletic, but I'm not sold on him yet. But they do have a great team in front of them.
yeah, and a good ad too for you're not getting you didn't get Kemper for what you wanted.
Yeah,
Well, we're not going to be poopy pants. We'll go get a guy who we think that can fill that void at a cheaper contract, right?
right. And any other storylines for you?
Not too many. Like I said, like I do see, it's a small one, but seeing Seattle take that next step, you had your kind of crappy year. You might have another crappy year, but you've got young forwards coming in. You've maybe got some younger guys that you've drafted over the last couple of years who are stepping in. Are they going to make improvements? Are they going to be key pieces? They signed Andre Burakovsky, who this is a guy who just wins wherever he goes. Is he going to bring a winning culture to this team? We'll see. Um, yeah, so that just seeing them because I think I watched a total of one period of Seattle last season. I'm not gonna lie to you, so I'll try to probably make a couple more this year.
Does Shane Wright make the team?
I think yes, but probably shouldn't make the
Right.
team.
Yes.
I think he does because he is a top 5 draft pick. He's got a lot of potential and he's got he certainly got a lot of talent, but it would be better to send him back to Kingston or maybe even I don't maybe I'm could be wrong in this, but could you send him to the AHL or do you have to send? No, you have to.
Yeah.
Junior players have to go back. Okay, noted. Yeah, so I don't know. He probably should go back to Kingston for that one last season, but pride's probably going to keep him on the team, I would say. And
Yeah, I
he's not
agree.
going to be. He doesn't seem like the type of guy who's could like, hey, send me down. He's going to be like, no, I can take the pressure.
Yes, and I don't think he'll take that well because he's first when he didn't go first and he went fourth. He did that stare down and he was all bitchy because he went
Poopy
fourth
pants. Yeah.
overall. So I worry about this guy. I didn't see a whole lot before the draft, but I agree. I think he'll make Seattle by osmosis. The fact that their team's not going to be any good, but I could see him being a guy who plays 7, 8 games and being sent down like Mason McTavish was last year in Anaheim, where he started the year with the team, and by mid-November you're back on, you're back in the OHL,
Yeah.
playing for Kingston or playing for another team that trades for your rights. But NHL camps open tomorrow, and something I thought I pitched you on the show
Mm-hmm.
next week and the next coming weeks, we could do a division or two per Tuesday to get people ready. I thought we could start in the Eastern Conference. We could do the Atlantic Division, and
Sure.
we could do Atlantic next week if you want to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I love that idea. I've had a couple of people message me when you guys are gonna some asking for the Canadian divisions, other asking for other divisions. So it'll be good to go on. And I think starting off strong with a great division like Atlantic with my Leafs
Yeah,
and some other okay teams on that division too. I think. Yeah. No, it'll be good, and I'm excited.
perfect. Yeah, I think we'll start because we're still a couple weeks away. October 11th is the first night of games. I believe it's Rangers, Lightning, and then it's Vegas. I forget,
Yeah.
but there's two games opening the opening night, and it's Might be October 11th or October 12th is the
How do
first
you
night of the season.
question? How do you feel about the 2 European games? Like that'll be the start to the season, but like,
Yeah,
do you feel that's good? It's good for overseas. Is it good for here? I guess.
I find it a long wait before the season starts. Like you got to wait a couple days, right, before
Hmm.
the next couple games. I find it a little awkward. Like I get they're
To get
trying to grow the game, but
yeah.
I wish you would have thrown this in. If you're gonna do this, start the season the next day, or you know what I mean, something a little different, because I just think they're weird games. Like when the NFL plays in London, they play that same day. They have a full slate of games that day. For the
Right.
NHL, you're gonna have one European game, and then you got to turn off your TV because that's the only game on. So I think for growing the game, you want people watching the whole day. So if you could throw it on, say, a Saturday morning in Germany or wherever, and
Hmm.
then you got games afternoon into night, that's the better way to go. That's what the NFL does. They seem to be doing okay when it comes to making money. So that's my only complaint with what they're doing. I think growing it is fine. I just don't like their schedule set up.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of it's to put the microscope on those games. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like there's 2 overseas. Okay, boom, boom. They're back-to-back days. Then days later, we'll see the rest of the teams play. So it's like
right.
they want fans to focus, dial in on those 2 games. Which
Bruins, correct?
no, Nashville and San Jose in Czech. Yeah, I
I
had the
guess
same
I know why
reaction.
they separated the games now, because nobody would have watched it otherwise.
Yeah. It's kind
I
of like
thought it was Boston. I think is playing a game somewhere this year. They might be
maybe.
playing in
Yeah,
Germany. So, yeah, something. That's why I thought it was Boston.
it makes sense if it's Boston. You have Pasternak, and it's being played in the not Czech Republic.
Right,
So
right,
it to have a player and Krejci, I guess now. So it would have made
right.
sense to
Yeah,
do that. But yeah, Thomas. I can only think of Thomas Hurdle as the only guy that it really
yep.
relates to for San Jose. But yeah, interesting. I'll leave you on this note. Who's the best 1-1 team that the record is better reflected from week 2? They're 1-1, but it's like okay, they don't feel like a 1-1 team.
Positive or negative?
Positive. Yeah. Well, give me both. Give me a positive and then shoot me with a
Okay,
negative before I
one
leave.
and one. They're 1-1, but they should be better. I'm gonna say.
Or they don't even, you know what I mean? They're 1-1, but it's like okay, they don't feel like a 1-1 team. They're at the
Okay, okay. Um, hmm. I was gonna say the Cowboys, but no, they started to win today. I'm gonna say the Saints
okay.
because
Yeah.
they have been really underwhelming to start the season.
Yes.
Jameis went full Jameis yesterday, and
Oh,
that
that
he
was
just
bad.
threw that game away. And their defense is good, but offensively, I don't love their team. He's hurt. They got injuries. Kamara's out, so
Hmm.
they don't feel they should be 0-2 to me. Another 1-1 team, I'll say that they should be. I'm gonna say should be feel better than being 1-1 is Baltimore.
Okay.
To me, Baltimore's a very good team. I expect them to win the AFC North. They had a tough go yesterday. I think their defense will bounce back. They have that championship build in Baltimore. Credit to Tua, credit to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, who absolutely balled out yesterday.
Hmm.
But I think Baltimore, I mean, they're up by 21 points. They should be 2-0. They should be better than 1-1, but they're not today because of it's just a terrible quarter.
Yeah. No. I can fully agree with that. They had a good first week 1, and unfortunately, they just met a better offense in week 2.
Who's gonna get to the mark first? Judge to 62 or Pujols to 700? We got Judge 59 dingers right now.
Yeah.
Pujols has 698.
I'm gonna go with the big. 1 second. Yankees play they play the Pirates. I'm gonna have to. Yeah, I'm gonna go with Judge. Yeah, just off
You're
that
gonna have
look
a big
alone.
series in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. No, I'm not too scared about them. Yeah, I'd say the Judge gets there pretty handsomely. Where does he cap out? We got 16 games left. I think I look for the Yankees.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
does he finish? Does he get to 70? Is
I think he
that a
gets to
stretch?
65.
65. That's not a stretch. Yeah, I can get to that.
65 to 67, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean he hit two on Sunday, so you have a couple 2-homer games you're in Pittsburgh. If you could take advantage of bad teams, that's the best thing for Judge is that I think they play the Red Sox in there again. Yeah, they play the Red Sox this
Yeah.
week. I think they had a 4-game set. Then they go to Toronto. Those are easy park, and you play at Yankee Stadium. That's as easy as it gets to hit a dinger.
Right.
Hit it down the friggin' right field line, 200 feet. It's over the goddamn wall.
Yeah.
So he's in some easier parks to hit home runs. So
Is Texas an easy
he
park or
needs
is that a tough park?
70, like if he gets hot.
Yeah. Yeah. Is he finishes in Texas? Is that a park that you could see him hitting a couple in, or is that pretty tough? I'm not sure of the layout there.
It's one of the deeper parks, but it can
Okay.
happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can certainly happen. I mean, he's got the power to hit it anywhere.
What I love
So
about yeah. Yeah, what I was gonna say I love about him is that I don't feel like I mean this is it's a significant achievement for himself, but I feel like he's ready to get the postseason underway, and I feel like there's a certain amount of pressure. Okay, you're the man, you're the best, you're probably going to win MVP. I've changed my vote on that from Shoei to Judge at this point because of how well he's played in the last 10, 15 games. I think there's a certain amount of pressure, and I feel like he needs to play well in the playoffs, and I think he knows that, and he doesn't care as much about individual awards anymore.
yeah, I agree. Because if he bats 200 in the playoffs, people will forget about that home run record pretty damn quick. Kind of
Yeah,
like Matthews, he hit 60. When you lose in the first round, it's
yeah,
pushed to the back burner pretty quick.
yeah.
Are you, as a Dodger fan, who scares you more, Mets or the Braves?
I'm probably a little. I'm probably a little more scared of the Braves.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Mets. Don't get me wrong; they were my team at the beginning of the year. I thought they'd get there, and I ultimately think that they still can get to a World Series. But Braves have one of the sneakiest, best pitching units I've ever seen, ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and that's not an understatement. Like, I look at their lineup and I think, like, Morton, Fried, Strider, right?
right. Yeah,
You've got Ian Anderson. You've got Kenley Jansen as your closer, who I knew very well. It's just a yeah. It's a really, really good pitching unit. On top of that, you got a lot of sluggers and a lot of really good fielders. So,
mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, the Mets are great because they have consistency. But they only have one guy who's a slugging machine, who's not the polar bear. The rest of them are all kind of base hitters, slash like get on bag, which doesn't scare me as much because I think the Dodgers could match that ball. I don't think they could match a slugfest with Atlanta.
The Braves series would be fun because it would be the third meeting.
It's a rematch. Yep.
You get the grudge match
Yeah.
between the two teams. That would be fun. You have the Padres are still. They looks like they're gonna make the playoffs because the Brewers just can't figure it out. But
Yeah.
Juan Soto is batting 165 since he got traded to the Padres.
I
He's
know.
been absolutely terrible. He's got 2 home runs in that span. I feel more and more confident that I said they would not reach even the championship series. I said the Dodgers wouldn't get to the World Series. Those are my 2 big baseball predictions. I'm fine with both of them, but the Padres, they're so lucky they're going to make it because the Brewers have just been so inept, but it's ugly in San Diego.
It's bad when you have to bank on another team's lack of success to get in. Yeah, then for the Brewers, I mean, it's just been this weird year where you don't get anybody. I don't think. Yeah, they didn't get anybody at the trade deadline, so you don't make your team any better. But like, your team wasn't that great to begin with. Halfway through the year, you got a couple pieces, but that's it on your team.
Right.
Yeah, interesting to
like
see. I mean, we're.
Jays?
Pardon?
Do you like the Jays? Do you think they could be a team to push for a World Series?
No, not really. I think there's some good things and bad things. I think making the playoffs is a good thing for this team because they need to get the naysayers off their back. But do I see this team going toe to toe with a Houston or even a New York for that matter? Probably not. No.
Yeah, I don't see anybody in the American League beating Houston. I think they're too good.
I watched a little bit of that game last night. Oh, they're incredible to watch. Yeah, they're hot right now.
Yeah, they've crushed the Rays. Rays have been getting crushed a lot lately, to be fair. But
Shocker.
you get by them pretty easily. But yeah, interesting week. We'll do the Atlantic Division next week on the show, and we'll talk about a number of interesting topics as we get into week 3 of the NFL, get closer to the NHL starting the MLB playoffs. So it's almost anarchy for sports starting up with everything coming at once. But fun show today, Shay. Always a pleasure, and we'll do this again next week.
Awesome. Appreciate you having me on. We'll see you next week, and have a good rest of your week.
Same to you.
All right.
There's Shamus Fillmore, everybody. Always great to see him. And yeah, we're gonna do the Atlantic Division next week for the NHL. So we'll break down each team, go through their off season, what we expect from them this upcoming year. A lot of changes in the Atlantic, so that's why we're going to start with that one. And we'll talk about obviously the Detroit and Buffalo and obviously the Canadian team. So we'll get into that tomorrow. We're gonna talk some college football tomorrow with some interesting different games from this weekend that haven't been able to touch on yet. Some good stories, some really good college football stories with some programs breaking in, having some success when it comes to Kansas, Duke, who play each other this weekend, who are both undefeated. Talk about that. Talk about get into some games from this weekend. I mentioned I was going to rewatch some games. Going to rewatch the Jets game tonight. When it comes to Cleveland, what they did in this game before they played the Steelers on Sunday. I watched the Steelers game this weekend. That was an ugly offensive performance. So we'll touch on that. Get into injury notes in the NFL and other training camp news as it comes out. We will break that all down tomorrow here on To The Point. So I didn't get into the Bills. I'll touch on the Bills tomorrow as well, as they were just dominant last night, and they got Miami this weekend, a battle of two 2-0 teams down in hot ass Miami, Florida. So that might just be the game of the weekend. Nobody expected that before, but it might end up being the game that you don't want to miss this upcoming weekend. So thank you all for joining today, for listening today. As always, you can find us on our social channels. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. I appreciate those. Helps our rating on Apple Podcasts. And anything you can do to support the show, I always appreciate. And just know, if you have any notes for me, if you have anything you want added to the show on Big Money Fridays with Matt Wright, if you want anything to do us different when it comes to gambling, when it comes to content, send me a message, because whenever you guys have anything to add, I like to add it to the show. I'm not perfect. I'm my own hardest critic, but be tough on me if you want, and I'll see what I can do to make the show better for all of you. So until next time, have a great day. Have a great night, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow here on To The Point.